Hi, this is James Gardner, the CineTechGeek, and I'm with Joe
Bogacz.
Joe Bogacz from Canon. And Canon, as you know, they're very, very well known in the cinema production with their great cameras, their see-in-the-dark cameras, many new interesting products this year. But I'm talking to Joe today because, you know, I'm focusing on high dynamic range, and Joe's really the man at Canon to talk about that. And so, first of all, let's start off with, you've got a prototype 2000 nit display, is that correct?
Correct. So that's 2000 nits edge to edge. So that means that if you actually just go to a white screen, you've got a work light. You could actually shoot with it. There's no dimming, it's edge to edge 2000 nits. So it's very, very bright.
And what sort of technology are we using in that monitor?
That's an LCD technology.
Cool. And is there a lot of interest in it yet? When should we see this monitor hopefully come to market?
The monitor, we're still getting feedback about commercializing it. So that's open right now, but we are getting all the production companies we've talked to, all the studios we've talked to. HDR is just at the point of boiling over.
That's right. And as you know, we're doing a lot of education on that this year, but there's something you said which pricked my ears and I really wanted to listen, was start at the lens comments.
Exactly.
So please elaborate.
Every image has to start at the lens.
That's
and
right.
People don't realize that a lens, the MTF curve of the lens, the contrast ratio of the lens, of course when you're shooting HDR, the contrast ratio is king in order to get the great luminance range. So then SDR is very, very easy to do. You know, lenses can do it. But now we're starting to get into that HDR area where you have to preserve the spectral highlights.
That's right.
You've got to make sure you don't have any artifacts. And then on top of HDR, you've got to make sure you're not introducing anything crazy because, you know, obviously we're only capturing 15 stops, 16 stops, maybe, you know, the maximum. So you have to make sure you're actually limiting the lens so you aren't getting any terrible artifacts over that range.
That's right. Now this is interesting. So a lot of the times I focus on the grading monitor, as we did at the start, but we need to also, you know, people think, I do 15 stops, I just need to shoot it and off I go. Well, that's not the case.
Exactly.
We've got the lens issue here, but there's also a lot of training, that I've got a lot of feedback why people are doing grading for high dynamic range content, the stuff that's going to theatrical release right now. And they discuss that you also need to be more careful on how you light.
Absolutely, absolutely. We brought in a 24-inch display, 400 nits.
Oh, that's right. You've got another monitor for field HDR
Exactly.
monitoring.
So it's got a 24-volt input, so it's absolutely for field use. And when you really look at it, and we have a diagram at the show to really illustrate this, is that there's, on the wide color gamut, because HDR isn't just luminance value, you're talking about the wide color as well. If you have slight variations on the lighting, so let's say you're lighting incandescent and you've got a small daylight in the background, on an SDR monitor, standard dynamic range monitor that everybody uses, that color space is compressed, and you don't notice that difference.
Right.
So you could deliver a master to the finishing company, but then he's got to put a power window on there and just change the color balance just a little bit in one little corner. And the HDR, you can see that absolutely. You can see every little variation in color temperature lighting. And
I have to agree with that. Like especially in the future of cinema, there was a lot of discussion with the pixel people. You know, the people who did. Sorry, I got a mental blank.
Yeah, that's okay. Welcome to my world.
Pixar.
Yes.
Pixar did a lot of HDR content, and it was very interesting where they talked a lot about when they were bringing the sun and other aspects of where they've done it in older DPX 10-bit and all that sort of stuff. When they bring it into high dynamic range, all those highlights had to be done completely again.
Exactly.
And that would hold true for camera acquisition as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so I hope you do take the time to watch those videos and pick up all that great knowledge in those videos from those people from those big companies.
It's completely relearning that.
That's
and then also on the lighting as well. Because on SDR, standard dynamic range, regular production monitors, then the luminance also is compressed because you're usually looking at 709, 100 nits or so.
Right.
So then any variation in lighting. So if you have two lights and one light's just a little bit brighter than the other, you can actually see the difference in shadows in the face on an HDR monitor versus SDR, and then all of a sudden you're into power windows again. So cinematographers are in a huge problem. And the same thing happens with wardrobe, same thing happens with makeup.
Right, and again, that's all magnified by comments from other discussions and panels that have been done over the last 2 weeks at CinemaCon and NAB.
Exactly.
Anyway, is there anything else you want to cover before we go?
Well, one of the things, you talked about the colors, and
Yes.
just before we started the interview, and really, it seems like when you're going from a standard dynamic range into HDR, it seems like all of a sudden you have all this extra stuff. It's almost like you have a box of crayons, and now you've got a huge box of crayons. So then people tend to use the crayons they like, and then slowly start trying other colors. So it's not a question of just suddenly you can do HDR. You've got to start experimenting, you've got to start learning, you've got to start picking the extra crayons and play it out, and then eventually you're going to get something that's absolutely so sweet in HDR.
Exactly right. It's a learning process, and it's time to start learning, because everyone I speak to, they all think HDR is going to be huge and very quickly very huge.
Absolutely.
So you need to start learning and starting educating now, in my opinion, and most people's opinion I've spoken to. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. This is James Gardner at the Canon booth at NAB 2016. Bye for now.